What's up, wrestling fans, trading card collectors? Welcome to another episode of Wrestling with Cards. We are taking a bit of a break today from the 25 most iconic wrestling card series because I had a chance to get Chris Brancato on the channel. As we stated in this interview, this was like a coordinating nightmare. And then, telling him, hey, well, your interview is not going to be on for a little bit because we're right in the middle of this video series of the iconic wrestling cards. But we're taking a pause to get him on the channel today. He's got a lot of great points as far as how he got into collecting, building the PC, how he can become super laser focused on a specific avenue, and maybe how that can help you in your collecting journey. So without further ado, let's kick it to the conversation with Chris Brancato. Ladies and gentlemen, anytime I try to get Chris on here, we have technical problems, we have scheduling problems. So I made the executive decision to take a break in between us doing the iconic wrestling card list, the 25 most iconic wrestling cards. I know people love that thing, but we're going to take a break because we had to squeeze Chris in here because this is like probably a year in the making. We've just kind of talked about it, and then we schedule it, and then it doesn't happen, and then I get new equipment, trying to work the kinks out of that. My internet goes out. Finally, glad to have you here, Chris. Welcome.
Absolutely. Thank you, man. It's an honor. When I first got into wrestling cards, I feel like you, Tony, and probably Stacking Slabs were the first people that I sort of cut my teeth on to sort of learn the ropes and everything, pun intended,
Yep.
and get going. So it's really cool to come full circle and be on the show with you now.
You mentioned those guys. This is not even a question we were going to discuss, but I got to ask, I feel like there's still not enough wrestling card content out there. Maybe there's some people that think there's too much already, and I don't think there's that many creators, but what do you think?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I feel like there's so many different voices in the community on Twitter that I've met over the years. And in terms of podcasts, I mean, it's truth be told, it's those people that I just mentioned, yourself included, Sports Card Nobody, and that's kind of all that I'm really sort of regularly familiar with and regularly tune in with. Beyond that, it's generally wrestling podcasts.
Sure.
But yeah, no, I mean that would definitely be fantastic to hear more voices out there.
You talk about the voices, and I think that's the whole thing. Is there's so many people out there that are doing like hardcore dives into different lanes. And even though it might not be for everybody, I think there's a segment out there for everybody to collect. So if each one of those segments started doing content for what they like and showing off their collection and talking about their ups and downs and, diving into sets and whatever it is, I think that would just kind of even broaden the collector base even more than it already is. But, you've been in for since I really started putting out content and doing stuff on social media. I've seen your name just kind of bouncing around from the get-go, really. So unfortunately, I think I only know of one show that you've been a part of. Have you been a part of more than that? I know you were on the show on the WTC TV. So you talked a little bit about your origin story there, but I just want to give you the floor to kind of introduce yourself to everybody, talk about your background in collecting, no matter what that is that you're collecting, and then kind of how that evolved into wrestling cards.
Absolutely. I mean, that was definitely the truncated version that I gave on that show because there were 3 other people that I was sharing time with. So it's nice to.
You got all the time you need right here.
Awesome. So first things first. Wrestling was definitely the first thing that I gravitated to as a kid. When I was 6 or 7 or so, right around that range, so probably around 92, 93. I remember getting into wrestling. My parents took me to my first show right here in New Jersey, where I still am. Right in the Meadowlands, and I remember seeing Macho Man against Giant Gonzalez, and I still have that T-shirt from that trip, which is really cool to have the Macho Man shirt. And that was absolutely the first thing I was obsessed with was wrestling. And the first thing that I remember collecting was the action figures, the Hasbro figures. But one distinct standout memory for me is even since I was a kid, it was always about the chase. Even since I was a kid, even since I was that young age, I was always into the rarer stuff. And I remember that, I would get the figures along the way at the toy stores, but there happened to be this flea market that we would have at the Meadowlands every summer, every week, booths would set up. And somehow along the way, I discovered this one older dude that had all the Hasbro figures. And he also had a lot of the rare figures that I didn't see in stores. And I remember seeing, I think it was kind of out of the loop with the figure terminology at this point. I think it was a series 3 or something, like the green card
The
one,
green
two, three
cards,
kit.
yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. And I think it was maybe $15 at the
Good
time. And
grief.
I begged my mom for it and I managed to get it. But that, even, just that memory of, it's funny to me that even at that age, 30 years ago or whatever, I was into the rarer stuff. And so along the way, that was always there. Wrestling was always there until until the Attitude Era ended, I would say. Then I kind of completely fell out of it.
That's really interesting too, because for most people it was the other way around. Like they got
Mhm.
out of wrestling and they got back in during the Attitude Era. But I'm interested to hear
Oh no,
why you went away.
I was into it in the Attitude Era, but right after that finished, like right after
I
Stone Cold was
gotcha.
done, that's
Gotcha.
sort of when I
Okay.
drifted.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I was way into the Attitude Era. That was really like, I remember, wrestling with my friends at school and just randomly pinning each other in the hallways
Yeah.
because whoever did it had the
Giving
hardcore
people the
belts or
stunner.
whatever. Yeah, like that's definitely a major part of my childhood. And then it went away after the Attitude Era. And then in terms of collectibles, I would say probably after that, the next thing that I picked up on was sneakers. Sneakers was definitely something I got into in high school and then a little bit after. And then I always kind of like morphed into another hobby. After sneakers, it went to comics, probably comics, I would say. It was the next thing that I picked up on. And comics was where I really feel like a lot of the aspects that we see in our hobby, I kind of built that foundation there, in terms of condition, in terms of eye appeal, in terms of monetary value, in terms of all that stuff. I sort of learned through comics and got really heavy into it and made a lot of friends in that, with lifelong friends that I still keep in touch with. And it's still part of my life now. I just don't collect. I still read the stories. I'm still into the movies. I just bought tickets to New York Comic Con. So I'm still into all of that. And I definitely feel like there's a crossover
Sure.
between those worlds. I mean, I see FTR is going to be there. I see Sasha Banks is going to be there. I'm going to try to meet both of them. So there's definitely like this sort of crossover parallel that I see between both worlds. Um, and with comics, as I learned, as I made my way through that world, I started getting more and more meticulous, more and more defined in my goals and what I wanted to accomplish. And, I would get these older Silver Age books, and then, I would just be happy to have them at first. And then over time, I would care about things like the condition. So I would try to upgrade them and sell stuff off to upgrade.
Yep.
And along the way, my main goal was to somehow, it turned into trying to collect the original run of Amazing Spider-Man 1 through 100. And I managed to do that. It took time and cost money
Sure.
for sure. But once I did that, it was weird. Once I did that, I was like, well, now what? You know what I mean? I felt like I reached that goal, and for whatever reason, it felt like something was missing, and it almost felt like that. Once I hit that point, I was ready to move on. And after that, I sold my whole comic book collection.
Whoa.
I sold it all to my local comic book store, which I've been going to for years. Cashed out, made good money, and coincidentally, simultaneously, I took an interest in cards, sports cards. Cards, I don't have that typical story that a lot of people have, where it's the nostalgia aspect of them collecting cards when they were kids. It was more so the figures for me. I do have a history with collecting. Not, I wouldn't even say collecting. I mean, I did pick up packs. I did, I was into basketball. That was the first thing I was into aside from wrestling as a kid in terms of main sports. Um, and I do remember high school picking up some football packs with some friends, but it never was really like me returning to cards for nostalgia's sake. But at that time, when I sold my comics, I remember some friends talking about Zion Williamson rookie cards.
Yeah.
It was when
That's when this whole thing kicked off. He's the one for it.
Yep. Actually, when I sold my comic book collection, coincidentally, it was a week before everything shut down for COVID. It was right before that happened. So it was just, coincidental timing for sure, which obviously led into the boom. But yeah, Zion Williamson, that was the thing that sort of sparked my interest. And and then at that point, when the pandemic started, I kind of went that conventional route / story that a lot of people have of the mainstream sports, the stockpiling cards to flip, to make money, the base, all the Luka base rookies and all that stuff. And not necessarily having an emotional attachment to anything. I mean, I did collect a little bit of Penny Hardaway, who was my guy as a kid. So there, in that sense, there was that nostalgia, but I didn't have that attachment to his cards, those 90s cards. But it was cool to discover that at the same time. And then as time passed, I cashed out on those and I made money on those. And that was definitely more heavily leaning on the investment side of things because it was just such easy money, as we all know at this point. It was undeniable. It was just too easy. And along that way, I got into the more classic stuff, the more vintage stuff, I guess, if you want to call it, the 80s cards, of the people that I liked as a kid, the Macho Man rookie, the Bret Hart rookie, and all the the Hulk rookie and all the Undertaker stuff, the action pack stuff, which I still think is super cool. But that's where it started for wrestling for me. I would say, what is it now? Probably pushing 3 years was when it started. Was when I started getting into wrestling cards, and then along the way, I started getting into the more modern stuff. And to sort of tie that back into wrestling, CM Punk was what brought me back to wrestling. Him coming to AEW was definitely what brought me back to wrestling. Because along those years when I was out of the loop, I still would get together with friends for like the big 4 pay-per-views.
Yep.
So there was a little bit of an interest there. I mean, maybe we would mock things or say it's not as good as it used to be or whatever. But it always was kind of there in the peripheral. And one constant person that always impressed me was Seth Rollins. That was always somebody that caught my eye. I didn't dive too deep into it, but that was somebody that caught my eye. And then you fast forward to CM Punk in AEW, and then I was back in. That pulled me in. That first year of AEW, I was super into. I went to the Grand Slam show in Queens when Kenny Omega fought Danielson, and CM Punk was there and all that stuff. And that really roped me back in. And then along that way, I also simultaneously started giving WWE more time and getting into that and looking at those cards. And I really, really liked the aesthetics and the eye appeal of the modern stuff, of the top stuff. That brought me to now. And here we are, and just super focused on Seth Rollins and loving wrestling. It's all I spend my time doing is watching wrestling. Like, I've spent months now just literally going back month by month. It's a daunting task, but I've gone back month by month and watched all the PLEs each month from the years that I missed to present to get caught up because I'm just so enamored by it. And it's the passion for the cards has added to that vested interest in wrestling, and vice versa. They feed off of each other.
Right. Yeah, it's weird that like I get like, there's during that boom, there was this whole thing of like treating the sports cards like betting because maybe they couldn't bet at the time. So it was, a lot of people like to buy those prospects or buy the legends to see if they go into the Hall of Fame or to see those like watch an active player while they're playing. And I feel like there's so many people in the ultra modern space of wrestling that are doing that now. And I think it's really cool. Like, but it's not so much that they're treating it like a I hope this guy wins the belt so I can flip this card. It's more like I'm
Yeah.
having fun with the journey, and
Mm-hmm.
it's the act of watching the in ring, whether it's you said Seth Rollins, whether you're watching going back like 5 years and watching something, or whether you're watching something on this coming Monday night. It's tying in the interest with the cards and the in ring product, which I just think is fantastic. And you touched on a couple things that I want to bring up as we kind of go in. So you talked about going from one hobby to another to another. And I think one thing I'd like to hear your opinion on is I think that's kind of looked down upon by a lot of people. They think that,
Mm-hmm.
especially in like the sports card boom, and then you had people going for sneakers, then NFTs, and then ticket stubs, and then whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
think what a lot of people fail to realize is a lot of that transition, yeah, it's just a quick get rich quick, but there's a lot of people who really do love just collecting a variety of things. And I know you've said that you've got rid of a lot of your stuff. Maybe you still have some. I don't know. Just talk about your mental process going through that, because I would like to kind of debunk the fact that not everybody jumps into different types of collecting avenues just to make a quick buck. Like, people love these things.
Yeah, absolutely. The way, and I've thought about that, you know what I mean? And I totally get that perspective that someone might have, especially when they're so passionate about wrestling cards. I mean, there's people here like that, like Paul and Tony. It blows my mind how long they've been doing, and Chuckster as well,
Yeah.
how long they've been doing what they've been doing, and it's super cool, and I find it really admirable that they found that sort of passion, and it's lasted for so long.
Yep.
And I envision that for myself as well. But the way that I look at it is, as opposed to looking at it as I've jumped from thing to thing to like the hottest flavor of the week or
Right.
whatever, the way I look at it is from comics, that was really the first thing where I formed that emotional attachment to. And I view the way that I collected comics as building my foundational knowledge to get to where I am now with cards. And once I discovered cards, it just clicked. It just felt like this is my world. This is all of the factors, all of the aspects involved, all of the variety, all of the parallels, everything. It's just, for my OCD mind that's constantly going,
Hmm.
it's perfect for me. And I feel like almost like it's like leveling up. I feel like I leveled up to this point, and this is like a natural organic space that I sort of thrive in. And the reason why I cash out on things and keep it so hyper focused, and I feel like this might roll into a topic that we talk about next, is because of, like I just mentioned, my OCD nature. I really go balls to the wall.
Yep.
And
Same.
to financially be able to afford it, I have to keep it hyper focused. I can't afford it all. I'm not one of those people that can have a variety of this, a variety of this, a variety of this. Even, you see the way that I collect. I'm super focused because my personality is just that. That's the only way it would work for me.
And I think that's kind of it seems like wrestling, of all of the genres of collecting, seems to have more people that are kind of like that go
Mm-hmm.
after, like, pick a talent or pick a promotion or pick a subset, and they just go all in on it, and they kind of block out everything else. Whereas I see like a lot of other types of, whether it's sports or non-sport, they people kind of dabble, and there's nothing wrong with either way, or kind of
Yeah,
combining the
no, of
two. But I
course.
have noticed that wrestling is kind of like that. So you also mentioned that the hyper focus, and you like the old stuff, but like at the same time you understand that maybe that's not where you want to go. So
Mm-hmm.
talk about your transition from maybe picking up this really cool stuff that you knew in the 80s, and then how that morphed into what you're collecting now, and then we'll start talking about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's stuff that I let go that I would still love to have, but I just, in order to keep it focused for where I wanted to go, I had to make that decision. I mean, I had an awesome Macho Man action-packed auto card, and I love that card, but I knew the value was there, and I knew if I wanted to chase, one of one sets or whatever, I had to make those tough decisions. Um, Saying, I had Stone Cold, the signature moves auto card. I
Yep.
love that card, and I had to make that tough decision. These were people that I loved as kids, and I would still love to have those pieces, and maybe I will get them along the way. But I just know that the way my brain works in terms of keeping things organized, I have to just let some things go. And I mean, so to touch on the route that I took with wrestling cards, I would say, like I said, it went from the 80s. 90s rookie stuff to, okay, let me, I would rip some packs. I would rip a lot of packs, obviously. I would rip boxes, and I would just keep the cards that I thought were cool of wrestlers that I liked, just general wrestlers that I liked or whatever, Becky Lynch cards, whoever. And then along the way, I started saying, okay, if I want to focus on the people that I really like, I got to sparse it down a little bit. So I would sell those, and the first people I started really focusing on were John Cena, Seth Rollins, CM Punk, and Sasha Banks. And then along the way, as I got deeper and sort of gravitated more and more to Seth cards, just to the quantity of Seth cards that were out there, someone had to go on the chopping block. And then when John Cena went, I said, okay, so we'll focus on these three people. Further down the road, especially once Panini came into the mix and things got more expensive.
Yeah.
Further I went, okay, Sasha has to go. And then it got down to two people. And now, before Panini came into that mix, I was able to generally get the stuff that I wanted, all the stuff that I wanted of those wrestlers. Maybe a superfractor of Seth would pop up. And it was under four figures. And because it didn't happen very often, it allowed me the time to wheel and deal and make that happen. So I was able to get those cards. And then, like I said, Panini came into the mix, and now, you got one of ones going for $2,000 easily on a monthly basis, and new one of ones popping with every release. And it sort of became a matter of, this was something that I touched on with you, of adapting to the prices and the market now. I tried something. I thought it would work. It didn't work because, I have no problem in saying that I'm constantly learning. I'm learning about myself, and I'm learning about the hobby, and I'm fine with that. I think that's fun. I think it's fun to really sort of discover your tendencies along the way, and it's never complete. I tried to incorporate it, and this was just recently. I mean, I literally 2 weeks ago, or maybe even last week, I tweeted that I wanted to start collecting Edge. And I was like, I'm going to do this to balance the fact that I can't get every Seth one of one at this point. There's some, people with serious money to burn that are coming into our hobby now, and it's no sweat for them to get those one of ones. So I have to kind of pick and choose, but to fill that void, there's plenty of talent out there. And this might work for other people as a way to adapt. For me, it didn't, but for others, it's a great way to adapt. There's plenty of talent out there that, in my opinion, is very undervalued still. And Edge was one of those examples. And so I said to myself, I would fill that void by trying to go after the Edge stuff. And the rare Edge stuff was there. And I bought a couple cards. I picked up a Galactic for like $60. I picked up a beautiful, impeccable Elegance card, I think it is, with a really nice patch on it for like $70. And, it was fun, but then more cards made themselves self-available for Edge, like a gold prism popped up recently, and I found that I had the funds, but I didn't have the inclination to make the buy.
Interesting.
The emotional attachment wasn't there. Whereas with these Seth cards, it's like, let's get it. You know what I mean? It's like, let's rock and roll. Like, I need that card.
Yep.
And it's not there. So all within a couple weeks, I tried something out, and I realized it's not for me. It might work for others, but for me, it didn't work. And to me, that said, keep doing what you're doing. Be okay with accepting the fact that you can't have them all at this point. It's just the name of the game at this point. You can get some along the way. I'm very grateful that I was able to pick up his base Black Prism. And I love that card, and I'm never going to get rid of that. But, you learn stuff about yourself throughout this journey. And I think I think it's really cool, to be honest.
Yeah, and you touched on something we'll get your opinion on real quick. Me and Tony both we're prime examples of this, but I've talked about how I think it's a great idea that if there's a talent out there, and I'm not just saying like pick a random person that's cheap, but whether it is Edge or whether it's, I always like to use Otis and Apollo Crews as examples, or maybe it's somebody even maybe it's somebody that's not even in wrestling anymore, but there's some kind of attachment there that you want to start collecting them, and then going all in to have the world's greatest collection of that talent. It's super fun to chase. You know, we've talked about chasing. It's a lot more affordable, as you spoke about. And it's just a different way for a lot of collectors to get their hands on the top tier cards of talent they do like, but like you said, aren't going to break the bank. So do you have any thoughts and opinions on that route of collecting?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's a great idea. I think that people should, I can't speak for everybody because there are those people like Tony, like Chuck, that have been in this hobby for years and are used to doing things a certain way and getting whatever they wanted with Tops and even further back with Fleer or whatever, and not having any financial difficulties in doing so. And then Panini comes along and that makes it more challenging.
Completely
And
changed everything.
yeah, and that it's the funny thing is for me that world is more familiar coming from the sports side of things. I mean, I'm familiar with these products, and for me, aesthetics and appearance always comes first. And some of these cards are just beautiful. I mean, I can't wait to see these kabooms. And if Seth makes that checklist, like that's going to be a card I need. But I think that instead of just raising the pitchforks and complaining and saying it's not the same, there's ways to adapt. There's ways to still have fun, like in like the way that you're saying and like the way that I'm saying with a Hall of Famer like Edge. Like you can still get his rare cards for an affordable price, and it's like it might not be the picture perfect scenario that you're used to, but you can kind of swerve. There's so many lanes to go. There's so much freedom that you have that like you still could have so much fun. And at the end of the day, whatever talent is on the card, it's still the same design and it's still a beautiful card at the end of the day. And that's a plus. That's a win to me.
Yeah, and it unlocks this collecting aspect that maybe you didn't know you had, and I'm finding that out with Cross. Like I'm super like it just adapts, and I'll kind of get your opinion on your PC, but let's go ahead and move into that. So
your relationship with Cross is super cool, dude. I see him like retweet things, and like it's really. I've said this to people. I've said this to Flex. Like it's really freaking cool that like he's into it too. You know what I mean? It's got to be gratifying to see that.
Yeah, it's cool. It's not always justification. Like I get this all the time, and we'll get into this later too, about, oh, you're not collecting a good investment. You're not collecting Hogan. And I'm just like, well, whatever. And like the other day when I pulled out like all those signed figures I got out of a collection that I bought from somebody, and I was able to pull those figures out of the rest of the figures that I'm selling. And I posted a picture of all those, and he replied with a picture of a whole bunch of Chucky dolls. Like, that's hilarious. Like, that's just too cool.
Super cool. That's something you wouldn't have probably found out if you didn't initiate with that post ever. Even if you met him, like, why would that ever come up? But you gave him an outlet to express that, and that I'm sure it's fun for him to do as well.
Yeah, and let's move into who you're collecting. So you said CM Punk and Seth Rollins. Is that your primary focus at this moment?
It is. CM Punk, it's rough. I wish it could be more CM Punk. I joke with people and say I wish 50% of me wishes CM Punk would come to WWE because presently I'm definitely enjoying that promotion more. But the other 50% of me is like, I just want to see him on Panini cards.
Right. Yeah.
Because his selection has been rough. And as we know, Upper Deck has not really been doing a fantastic
Started off really
job.
hot and is completely tanked.
Yeah. I'm really, really hoping that these metal cards come along the way because the CM Punk cards that I saw on the sell sheets look fantastic. And I would love that. And I mean, CM Punk is my all-time favorite wrestler. So if he had better cards, I would probably go even heavier on him. But since that's not the case, it's kind of pick and choose the stuff. For me, in terms of super collecting, I don't follow the notion that I have to have it all, no matter if I like it or not. You know what I mean? It's very hard for me to spend my money on something that I'll look at and then just toss in the box and not even care. You know what I mean? I'm only going to buy something that I think is pleasing to the eye. And with CM Punk, it's limited. My collection is more limited. I do have some stuff that, like my favorite card, I have maybe 25, 30 cards of his. And Seth, I have triple that easily, maybe quadruple. But my number one favorite card is my Topps Heritage Superfractor 2007 Topps Heritage Superfractor, which was his WWE rookie year in a PSA 10. It's the
Nice.
only card on the pop, and I love that card. And I don't have many of his cards, but that is my favorite card in my collection because I think it's beautiful.
I think that kind of compensates. Like you don't have. I think there's a notion out there, and I've talked to people offline, multiple people that are like, what is a super collector? What's the definition? Does that mean I have to have this many cards? Does it mean I have to have the best cards? This is a prime example of somebody might have the biggest CM Punk collection, but maybe you have the best card that there is available for him. It's a balancing act, and I think I think we're at this world now where, hypothetically, I could have the best carrying cross collection in the world, but that doesn't mean that there's other people out there. And I know for a fact in the community, there are people that have some really high end cross stuff that I don't have. In my opinion, that makes them just as equal as me as far as a collecting community, and we can talk about it.
Absolutely. I don't think that there's necessarily this definitive version of what makes a person a super collector or who has the best collection.
Right.
I mean, obviously, unless it's just so far to the extreme. But that was something I questioned along the way as well. Like, am I a super collector? Do I fit under that umbrella? And then just as I went, I feel like it kind of, that's the thing about the hobby is like, that's what's so fun about it is like the further, instead of trying to like press out the answer immediately, the further down the road you go, things kind of just answer themselves.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It becomes clearer along the way. It's all part of the journey. You know what I mean? And I've talked about that a little bit with Shane, who collects Brett. And he said to me, like, I feel like I need that transcendent superfractor of Brett to have the premier Brett collection. And I said, I don't necessarily think that. I mean, just because you don't have that one card, if you build a nice variety, that's equal standing ground. Just like you said, it could go either way. You know what I mean? There's no clear-cut answer. You could have a kick-ass collection whether you have 10 cards that are, quality over quantity, or you could have a kick-ass collection if you have 500 cards. Either way.
Like for that Braid example, hypothetically, let's say, and I'm making this up, let's say he had the world's biggest collection of the 87 Topps, which is a pretty phenomenal, well-known card at this point. That's a niche that he could say, I have the biggest, best Bret Hart collection of this. Now, there's like, say 500 of the same card or whatever. But in my opinion, that's still something that's a cool accomplishment in collecting, just as much as having a superfractor or the best one-of-ones or whatever it is.
Totally. Absolutely.
So what would you say that your attention is spent on mainly in your collection? I know obviously you said that you're going harder for Seth Rollins and not as much CM Punk. Is there specific product lines you're going for more than others? Is there specific cards you're trying to chase down? And I mean, if you take that wherever you want, if you got cards you want to show off, whatever it is you want to go with.
Sure. Like I said, I generally just chase what catches my eye with every Panini release. There's still stuff here and there that I'll pick up from the past, from Topps, if, undisputed cards or whatever, if it's something I don't have. I kind of feel like I've sort of tackled that ground for the most part. There might be something random that could pop up, but I feel like I generally got a lot of the stuff, fortunately, luckily, along the way that is not going to leave my collection. I've gotten to this point now where I have to be more selective because it's becoming increasingly difficult to part with things. The stuff that I have now, I feel like I whittled it down to the stuff that I really love. And it's tough to let go now. I mean, all the ancillary stuff that I had in the past is gone. It's got that's funded things, that's
happens.
Fund yeah. So I have to be more selective. But fortunately, prices have softened a little bit on certain things, especially Prism this year.
Yeah.
To touch on something that I know you wanted to discuss, I think this will segue well into it in terms of the community and how it affects wrestling cards and whatnot. As I've told you, I was hunting the Prison Rainbow for this year set since I got the Black Prism. Week later, Gold Prism popped up, got that. Week later after that, a Gold Shimmer popped up, got that. So I got the toughest ones out of the way. And I said, when Prism came this year, I told myself, I'm only going to keep an eye on the rare stuff. I'm not going to do the rainbow stuff. I'm only going to look at that. Sure enough, the one of ones popped up. They popped up very fast. And I said, you know what? I can't afford all this. I had to let the auto go to,
What do you think the deal is this year? Because even with like the cross one of one popped up within 3 weeks after the release, what do you think the deal is with all of these popping up so much more quickly with
I
less
have
hype on the
no
product?
idea. I have no idea. It's really
Weird.
fascinating. I remember Easter Sunday, the Black Prism popped up, and like 5 people sent me the link, and I went back and forth, and I worked out a deal, and it happened. And so yeah, I mean, I went into it saying I'm only going to go after the rare stuff. Rare stuff popped up super fast. Couldn't swing it all. Watched some of it go. Time passed, and I said, well, now what? I don't want to just sit around idly with this lull, because when there's a lull, that's when I buy things that I regret. And I
Right.
didn't want to do that. So I said, you know what? Let me look into the rainbow. I have the gold. I have the gold shimmer. I have the black. There's a blue shimmer for auction. So right there, that's 1 through, serial to 11, the rare stuff that I can have. So let me look at the prices of the parallels, the more common stuff. And to my surprise, because I remember what they cost last year when they first came out, they were expensive. Mojos were going for over $200, and that was the reason why I didn't want to chase the rainbow at first. But then I started looking at these parallel prices, and I was seeing they were like $30, and the orange 99 was maybe $10, and I was like, okay, maybe I should try to pursue this. And one day I just hacked away at the parallels for a reasonable amount of money, and I think I
Yeah.
knocked off like at least half of the checklist, maybe even more, maybe 2/3. And I said, all right, maybe I could do this. So I started reaching out to people. I reached out to you, and I asked people to retweet my tweet of the checklist and where I was at that point, and trying to chase that rainbow. I was posting it everywhere, and now I've gotten to the point where, as of right now, it's complete. I mean, I'm waiting for the white sparkle if that comes, and if the lucky envelope, I mean, we'll see if that comes.
Yeah,
But
those yeah, who knows what's going to happen with those.
I managed to get one last year, the only one I ever saw. Um, Probstein had an auction, and I got it, and that was the only one I ever saw. And but who knows this year? I mean, the white
Right.
sparkle is months behind, so I don't even know if we're going to get that. But to sort of shout out somebody and to touch on the community and how fucking fantastic it is. People really look out for each other in this community. And just yesterday, the last card I needed was the green pulsar. And a buddy of mine, his name's Zach Flickinger, he's on Twitter as well. He also collects Seth.
Oh, okay. Here we go.
Yeah. He also collects Seth, but he knew where I was at. He knew I had the Black Prism. He knew what I was trying to do. I was literally snoozing yesterday when all this happened. I woke up to a text, and he goes, dude, the green pulsar popped up on eBay. I bought it immediately for you because I knew you needed it. I was like, no way. Like, this is a dude that collects Seth and wants that card for himself, was being selfless enough to know that that was the last card I needed, and sold it to me for the $40 that he paid. And now as I said, as of this point, I have that rainbow. And I never thought I would get that for Panini. I mean, I have a few at Tops, but Panini, that 30 card checklist or whatever, 30 plus, it's a daunting task. But because
Do
the
you, do you
price
do
is,
you think that now that you've completed that, going back to what we were talking about as far as like what makes you the premier collect, and it's not a competition, but
yeah,
inside your mind it can be a competition as far as with yourself, I think, as far as like
mm-hmm,
trying to reach those goals.
mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm,
putting together this complete rainbow now, are you at the point where, because I'm kind of this way with Cross, I've got the first Prism Black 101, I've got a rookie Superfractor 101, and the Transcendent 101. I would say I've got the premier. Like, there's other one of ones out there I'd like to have, but I may not ever
mm-hmm,
get them. If I can, cool. If not, fine. I'm at
mm-hmm,
that point where if I don't get them, I'm still content with this collection I built. So, are
mm-hmm.
you kind of that way now that you've finished this Prism run and you've got the whole rainbow completed, or is that not good enough for you and you're still chasing? I mean, we're all chasing, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't undermine the accomplishment. I think it's a hell of an accomplishment, and I think that it's super gratifying. And I'm gonna love to look at it. Like, that's the thing with rainbows. It's so funny. It's like as I was saying before, sometimes you get a card, you look at it, you toss it in the box, and you don't look at it again. And
Yeah.
I mean, those, because I'm just such like a person that's about the chase and likes the rarer stuff, I might feel that way to something like the Hyper Prism individually. But then to see that rainbow together when it's a collective thing, it totally changes that whole philosophy that I have of like, oh, I might just toss it to the side, and it makes it all worth it. So to answer your question in terms of do I feel like I have the premier collection? Yes and no. Another thing that's been fascinating about wrestling cards is we tend to sometimes be naive to the fact that everything is out there. Everything is public information. Like, oh, I didn't see this card, so therefore it must be still in a box. It must still be in a pack, and it just hasn't been unearthed yet. But along the way, I met somebody that operates completely in the dark. He collects Seth, and he operates completely in the dark. He has no social media presence, and his collection is incredible of Seth. He has my absolute favorite card. He has the Transcendent Superfractor, and he has like 20 other one of ones. And that's just the way he operates. He doesn't want anything to do with social. He's a super nice guy. I talk to him regularly now, but I think it just ties into what you were saying before of like everybody's definition is different. It's the quality versus quantity thing, and I think that because there's so much variety, it's hard to have an individual premier collection. I feel like there could be multiple, you know what I mean? And
I agree.
Yeah, so I wouldn't go as far to say that, but I would go to say that yes, I'm going to obviously continue to chase. I'm going to continue to look. There's cards that I'm bidding on now that I still want. That's always, and I hope that's always the case. But I will say that I don't get so caught up in the rat race that I forget about my accomplishments and don't value what I currently have. I do absolutely appreciate what I've gotten, and it's meaningful.
I think I'm at that same point too, where like you're content with what you have, but you're still chasing. So if you chase and you miss, and you chase and you miss, and you chase and you miss, well, you're still going to look back at what you do currently have and be like, well, I have unbelievable things that most people can't do. So always looking at the positive aspect of your collection instead of, like you said, just throwing it in a box. I think that's huge.
It's important to take that mental refresher every so often when you get so caught up in things. And if you feel defeated, if you feel like, fuck, I lost that card, I got sniped on it, like, take a step back. It's not the end of the world, and enjoy what you have. So many people say it, but it's very true. And maybe it is a skill that you have to learn. You know what I mean? It's being present. You know what I mean? It ties into mindfulness, I guess, if you want to say. But it's much more enjoyable if you can manage to not get so caught up in that moment and look at the bigger picture and what you've done. You know what I mean?
A couple things. Let's go back into the community for a minute. I want to throw way back. It feels like way back. I don't remember actually when it was, but I saw across. I think it was 21 Chrome Superfractor that you had, and I found it on eBay, and I tracked it back to your username on Instagram, which is a good hack, by the way, for people who don't do that. And you gave me a heck of a deal once you found out that I explained the story, and that may have been where our conversations first one-on-one started. I'd seen you floating around on Twitter or on Instagram, but that's where that started. And once again, you were able to get, I don't deserve anything, but you were able to get me, who super collects Cross, that card to go. And I've got the rainbow complete of that now. So thank you again for that.
Awesome.
And I want to know what you talked about other Seth collectors. I think it's always a friendly it's always a friendly competition. We've kind of spoke about that, but I think kind of people underestimate the community aspect of people who collect the same wrestler or the same set, and how that can actually benefit everybody. I recently found a handful of other, I want to call them super collectors, but carrying cross collectors, and got together. There's some people that are going after one of ones, so I've kind of backed off those because they're not as important as some of it, maybe the other stuff I'm chasing. And I think the communication that you can do within having private groups or knowing the other people who collect who you collect is really beneficial. So the floor is yours to kind of talk about maybe some other set collectors. And then I have another community aspect I want to touch on after that.
Absolutely. Yeah, along the way, more recently, I would say 3 months ago, I can't really say I can think of too many people that like were heavy into set like I was, where that was their main focus. You know what I mean? I know people collected it here and there. They more so had that variety mentality to collecting. But recently, there's been a couple people, Zach included, that have reached out to me and just, were interested in getting into collecting Seth Rollins. One person that comes to mind is my buddy Matt Person. He reached out, and for somebody that's looking to start collecting a talent, the way that he did it was definitely the most respectable way to do so. He directly reached out to me and said his intentions and had questions for me. He was just curious, what should I do? How should I approach it? And, naturally, I think in all of human nature, you're kind of like, who is this guy? Is he going to be a threat? Is he going to be confident? You're a little bit weary, but, because of my personality, I wanted to help him along the way. And I wanted to just, be helpful, just like I would want if I was starting out. And I do respect the fact that he came to me and identified me as somebody that, has a good collection, has a collection that caught his eye. And he was just genuinely curious. And time has passed and we talk every day. We're super friendly with each other. And this ties in really well to it, actually. His number one goal was to get a Seth Superfractor. That was his absolute top of the mountain thing.
Just any Superfractor?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just a top Superfractor of Seth.
Gotcha.
That was his thing. And he knew I had two. And I always was like, yeah, I get it, but I don't know if I'm going to let go of those. I love those cards. And, he just would casually, just politely say, hey, if you ever want, and then recently I decided to let one go. And I decided to, I said I could use the money. And I said, and that's what's great about this community, at least for me. I mean, I don't think everybody necessarily feels this way, but it might sound corny, it might sound cliche, but you definitely get gratification helping out other collectors get their number one goal.
Yep.
And I knew how valuable it would be to him. And so I proposed selling one of them to him, and he was taken aback. And he said, let me wheel and deal and try to raise funds and make this happen. And he was able to do it. And I know that he absolutely cherishes it. I know that it's in a good home. And he's like, I'm never going to get rid of it and if I ever do, I'll come back to you. And that he was the only person I went to propose selling this thing. I wasn't going to put it, I didn't even want to fully let go of it, but
it seems like the scenario, like everything just lined up.
Exactly. He was the only person. If he said no, I would have said, okay, I'll keep it and I'll sell other stuff if I need some cash. And but it just made sense. And now it's in a collection that I know it's cherished, and it's really, really, I didn't get that from comics. I didn't get that gratification of knowing that it's in somebody's hands where they just love it. You know what I mean? And it's meaningful. It adds another dimension to just collecting cardboard pieces of paper,
All right. So stick with me for a minute. We're going to tie in community and we're going to tie in your styles of collecting. And this is going to be kind of the last thing that we're going to talk about today. So you've mentioned that there's a huge community out there that's in the dark. And I think that we're kind of in this bubble with social media has created these great communities. I wouldn't have known you or Tony or Paul or Chuckster or David Peck or Car Foundation or anybody if it wasn't for social media. So we get on there, we communicate with each other and talk about these things. But I think it's understated that there's a huge amount of collectors out there that we just don't see, we don't know about, they don't want to know about it. I've gotten emails, no DMs, emails from people who say, hey, I listen to your podcast. I watch the videos. I don't have social media. Here's what I collect. Thanks for what you're doing, or talk about this card or whatever it is. So as I create more content, I'm getting more emails like that, and you find out that there are these great people out there that are collecting and have massive collections of these cards that, like you talked about, people say, "Oh, it hasn't been pulled," or "Where is it?" Well, it's in these people's
And deep
collections that don't talk
pockets,
about it.
and deep pockets.
Yeah, that also don't want to talk about how much they paid for that or
Yeah,
whatever. So
yeah.
in combination with that, styles of collecting. Let's take this to CM Punk. I'm going to
Hmm.
go out on a limb and say that there are probably some people out there who treat your CM Punk collection like they treat my Cross collection or Tony's Loomis collection, just disrespectful. They don't, they'll look at it and say it's not a good investment.
Hmm.
Meanwhile, maybe there's also a kind of super collector of CM Punk out there operating in the shadows, buying up all the best stuff. And I just want to get your opinion on kind of the bubble that we're in, because
Hmm.
I think a lot of people see what's on the surface of social media. Oh, this Hogan gold card, or this Sasha Banks transcendent, or this, one of one AEW card, like whatever it is. They see a lot of praise about it. A lot of the way that people operate, they're like, oh, I have to do what this person's doing because this is what the community's telling me. When
Hmm.
in fact, there's so much fun being had out there by other people just doing their thing, like you continuing to collect CM Punk when a lot of people are talking down on him for numerous
Hmm.
reasons, or
Hmm.
me with Cross, or Tony with Loomis, and there's a lot of other people out there doing that thing. So, what is your opinion on just kind of doing your own thing, staying in your lane, despite still being part of a community, but not letting that community narrative drive your collecting habits?
Hmm. Yeah, it's a good question. I think that to tie into the social media aspect, too many people are concerned with recognition. Too many people are concerned with, putting it frank, what other people think of them and they want to fit into a certain category. They want to fit into a certain sentence associated with X and X. And I think that that will rob a person of joy. Um, Comparison is the thief of joy. And I think that you need to follow your gut, you need to follow your eye, and you need to follow your brain and see what you connect with, regardless of any of these factors. It could be a
Yep,
base card, it could be a base refractor, it could be a one of one, whatever it is. You need to have that connection, because then guess what? At the end of the day, if you don't have that connection, it'll be on the pile to sell a month later. And I've been there. And that's part of the journey. That's
it
part
is.
of
It's a huge
learning.
learning process.
Exactly. There's definitely a learning curve to this hobby. And, I can't say that it's incorrect or wrong,
Right.
because you learn. Hopefully you learn. Hopefully you don't blow all your money and get burnt and leave the hobby. There's one particular philosophy, quote, point, whatever you want to call it, that I have to call out, that still stayed with me like months later, that I remember Drake making. He said that so many people are caught up in buying a card, owning it for whatever, X amount of months, half a year, whatever, deciding that they're ready to part ways with that card, and then seeing that that card has dropped significantly in value and say, oh, that was a waste of time, what a
Mhm.
bad investment, whatever. If you're a collector, like me, like you, like all of us, you have to compensate for the fact that in those months that you owned that card and you weren't ready to sell it in those previous months, it provided you with a certain level of enjoyment, a certain
Yes.
entertainment value that could relate to monetary value. It's the same, it's not literal, it's not physical like a car that you put miles on, but it's like a lease. You spend time with that card, and there is a certain type of value that you can sort of translate to a monetary value. So you shouldn't look at it as, this card was a bad buy because now it's worth half the amount of money. Like, it brought you pleasure at a point
Right.
in time. It brought you joy at a point in
Well,
time, and
and it's
that's,
not a zero sum game either. Like they're
yeah.
physical, tangible items. So even if you
Mm-hmm.
sell it for $1 and you pay 300 for it,
Mm-hmm.
hypothetically down the road, like you said, you still got enjoyment for however many years you own that thing.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like, I think about this now with my friends in, whatever, everyday life, that the biggest the biggest thing about the community that can inspire, I think, knowing firsthand people to get into the hobby is pure excitement. Just
Yes.
pure excitement. Because my excitement, all my friends, almost all of my friends, never had any interest in cards. Now all of them have some sort of interest in their own lanes in cards, I think just because of my pure excitement. They see how much pleasure it brings me. They see how much I talk about it. They see how fun it could be. I have a friend that's big into NASCAR. He collects NASCAR cards now. I have a friend that's big into Star Wars. He collects Star Wars cards now. So I think that that's the best thing that, people can do, that to inspire others. And
Yeah.
just spend time when you start. Don't dive into buying immediately. Learn, research, take your time. I'm not big on the way things went down with Gary Vee in the hobby, but there's one thing I remember him saying, something along the lines of, you should spend 40 hours
Yeah.
for anything that you get into, just studying and learning. And I completely agree with that. Just don't, because you can make mistakes, and you will make mistakes, but you'll learn that along the way. But the whole goal is to better prepare yourself for that in the
Yep.
beginning. And then you'll learn along the way. And I mean, maybe it's not for you. Maybe you don't. Maybe you are more concerned with the investing side of things, and that's a whole nother conversation. But if you do have that collector nature and gene within you, you'll figure it out along the way.
Yeah, and interacting with the community, like, no, I can't stress it enough. Don't be afraid to post your base card. Don't be afraid to
Yeah.
post like whatever it is. It gets
And don't
people
be concerned.
excited. Go ahead.
Don't be concerned so much with the likes and the stat
Yeah.
and the this and that. It's not high school. This is meant to be fun. This is meant to be you expressing yourself. It's culture at the end of the day, and it's part of who you are. It's part of who
Yeah.
you are, and that, don't lose touch with that. Don't lose touch with that along the way, because you feel like you're doing something wrong because this person has all the interactions and all the popularity and whatever. You know what I mean? That stuff is vacuous. At the end of the day, if you leave the hobby, they're not going to remember you. You know what
Right.
I mean? You're doing this for yourself. And yes, the best part about it is the people that you meet along the way. I mean, I've said it before when I went to the National last year. The cards were fun. I picked up some great cards, but I went out to dinner afterwards with Caleb, with Tony, with Paul, and with Ryan, and we ate dinner and hung out with each other for 4 hours and just talked cards the whole time. And that is a memory that I'm not going to forget. And that is just as, if not better, than the actual cards. And that all came to life because of the cards. So
Right. Yeah. And I'm the same way. Like, I'll post random crap that's in my collection, whether it's cross stuff, whether it's like, who knows what, it could be anything random that's behind me here. And like, somebody will reach out and they'll say, hey, I saw this and it inspired me to start collecting this, or I like your style, you're collecting this. And like, it all started with the cards, or in some cases the collectible, where like, if I wouldn't have posted those things, maybe I didn't inspire somebody to start their own way of collecting or their own thing. So it's like you said, it's amazing how we start off with the collectible or the card, and the next thing you know, you've got the community built, you've got these relationships built, and then these other projects built out of this. It's just an amazing time.
Absolutely. 100%.
Thanks for coming on the show today. I'm fine. Once again, as we started the show, how long have we been trying to work this out? Like, it feels like a year now. I don't think it has.
Beginning of the year, I'd say. Probably the beginning of the year.
Yeah, pretty close. And luckily, we were able to bring this great conversation to everybody today. I know people after this conversation are going to want to send you DMs or get in contact with you. Let everybody know where they can find you and anything else you want to share. Parting words for the community as we get out of here.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on Twitter. It's my name, Chris_Brancato. You can find me on Instagram, which is Boomerang Arrows. And advice is just keep searching for that emotional connection. You'll know it when you have it. If you don't have it yet, if you do have it, that's great. And I think that, as I said earlier, this is a journey. This is something that the best way to succeed in it is to always be open to learning and always be understanding to the fact that you don't know it all, and being okay with that. Right. And just having that sort of intellectual curiosity to want to learn more, want to dig deeper, and then anything's possible. It could open up tons of other branches that you didn't know you would gravitate to.
Couldn't end on a better note. And again, I'll put your social links in the show notes, guys. Make sure to check the show notes for all the ways you can help support all of my content, but also give Chris a follow on whatever social. If you're on all the social platforms he is, give him a follow. And if not, hey, start an account. Start posting your own cards and follow Chris while you're at it. Chris, thanks again for making the time to come on today because we know how hard it was.
Absolutely. Thank you, Zhan. I appreciate it.
Thanks again to Chris for coming on the channel today and enlightening us with all of his styles of collecting, what's worked for him, maybe with some stuff that hasn't worked for him, and kind of ideas that we could bounce off each other. I hope this video brought you some value. If it did, hit that subscribe button, give me a like, and tell everybody about this channel. Tell a friend, tell a family member, tell a wrestling fan, tell any type of collector of anything. As we spoke about today, collecting comics, collecting action figures, cards, whatever it is, collecting is just an awesome thing, and it's awesome to be a part of this great community with members like Chris that are able to come onto this channel. Once again, until next time, click the videos on the screen for more great wrestling card content because there's a lot of good stuff in the archives. See you next time.